Hi, everybody. I'd like to welcome you all to Watchung Booksellers and to this incredible celebration of Dionne Ford's book. We recognize that we have everyone crammed in a little tight, but everyone wanted to be here to celebrate. So thank you. Thank you for putting up with our tiny space here. But I'm Marta from Watchung Booksellers, and it's with great pleasure, that it's like a book I heard you talking about for how many years? Like 20 years. You gave birth, and we're celebrating tonight. So Dionne Ford is an NEA Creative Writing Fellow and the co-author of the anthology Slavery's Descendants, which we had the honor of hosting you with. And her work has appeared in the New York Times, Literary Hub, New Jersey Monthly, The Rumpus, and Ebony. And she's won awards from the National Association of Black Journalists and the Newswomen's Club of New York. She holds a BA from Fordham University and MFA from NYU, and she lives in Montclair, New Jersey with her husband and daughters, and we are so thrilled to be hearing about your book tonight. It is our great honor to have as our conversationalist this evening, Cleyvis Natera. Cleyvis, we had the honor of hosting you for your book, Neruda on the Park. Was that October?
Yeah, was it? No, it was May.
Was it?
This
Oh
time
my
last
gosh, a
year?
year ago. Time has absolutely no frame of reference in my life anymore. But so we're so thrilled to have you here in conversation with Dionne tonight. Cleyvis is the author of the critically acclaimed debut novel, Neruda on the Park, which we have just a few copies because it's coming out in paperback, I think, the week after next. So you can sign up for paperback. Cleyvis holds a BA from Skidmore College and MFA from NYU, and she lives with her husband and 2 young children in Montclair, New Jersey. Thank you both for coming and for sharing the book with us.
Well, thank you everybody for being here.
Thank you so much for being in conversation with me.
Well, don't thank me yet. Let's see how this goes. First, I want to just apologize to everyone in the front if I flash you, because it's like the first warm day, and I have to let my legs out. I was like, I hope everybody's okay right here. So apologies in advance to the front row. I am so thrilled to be here with Dionne. I had the opportunity to read this remarkable memoir a few months ago, and I just haven't been able to stop thinking about it. It is brilliant, it is beautiful and moving, and I'm so excited to get into it. So the way we're gonna do this is that I'm gonna warm you all up with a little question for Dionne, then she's gonna read a little bit, and then I'll come back and ask some questions, and then you get to ask some questions. So just as I'm getting you started, just start thinking about your questions. How does that sound? Good. Okay, don't move too much because it's really hot. So we all have to be like what we do. The first question, I'm really curious just to hear a little bit about your journey. I know that you started out as a fiction writer, and then you ended up deciding to write this memoir. So I'm really curious if you would spend a few minutes telling all of us about your journey as a writer.
Sure, yeah. So, we have so much in common. Both went to NYU for fiction. But long before that, I started out as a journalist. And so I guess I was kind of always working on this in a way. I feel like it was probably my first journalistic endeavor, frankly. From the time my grandpa told me about his grandparents, I was interested in them and would, from time to time try and find information about them on my own. By the time I decided that I wanted to, go and get my MFA, and I had a novel that I was working on, I was really excited to get into that prestigious place and be able to work with such, smart and talented professors and, other writers. My cohort was so smart. And by that point I had been working on my memoir separately and alone, and felt like I had, gotten to a good place with it, and I would just circle back to it, at some point. But once I got to school, weirdly, after one semester, like it just was the director of the program, even though I was there for fiction, and they had no nonfiction track at that time, if it would be okay if I worked on it, on my memoir as my final project. And she was fine with it as long as my thesis advisor was fine with it. And my thesis advisor was, so it was kind of like this, I've been doing it, you know, on my own as a passion project, but it also kind of became this validation, I guess, from, to have them say, yeah, that's great. And so, and that was in 2015, 2016. So, you know, it's been a long journey, but I will say that after I started working on it there, I kind of quickly found an agent. So that was also sort of just another kind of outside validation that this project that had been mostly mine might find a place in the world as well.
Yeah, I love to hear that. I mean, anytime that we follow that urgency, both in our imaginations, I think, and also just in our lives, like the story that can't wait to get out is the one that takes center stage so often. And if we listen, I think the result can be just astounding.
Yeah.
So why don't you read to us for a little bit?
Okay, here we go. Hang on a second. Glasses.
I just never take mine off.
No, we're all we do.
It's a weird thing to get glasses like later in life because I'm still not like sort of used to needing them. So I'm always stumbling around looking for them. So I'm just gonna read from my prologue since it sets up the book. And hopefully it will give you some idea of the course that the book takes. And my prologue is called A Relation. If you are going to look for your enslaved ancestors, you will have to look for the people who enslaved them. Any African American can expect that 19% of their ancestors were white men. So the enslavers might also be your relatives. This is a study in contrasts. Shadow, light, black, white, joy, pain, victim, perpetrator. You will find ephemera, editorials, photographs, wedding announcements, and atrocities. Lynched uncles, your people as property in someone's will, deed, or mortgage guarantee. You will also find the living, third cousins once removed, fifth cousins straight up, and descendants of the family that forced your family into slavery. You will meet them on beaches, in dusty archives, in farmhouses, scratching at the past like it is a lotto game, and you are strokes away from a million more reasons to believe. For a time, you will cease to believe in or pray to God, and instead will pray to your ancestors, the enslaved ones, the women, because they are what you want to be: mother, creator, feminine, divine. They were raped, they were sold away, they kept on living, some even thrived. If you are going to look for your enslaved ancestors, you will have to reconsider the word lucky. In 1858, when Colonel W.R. Stewart, a wealthy Louisiana cotton broker, married Elizabeth Macaulay, a girl from a long line of North Carolina plantation owners, her family gave the couple a slave named Tempe Burton as a wedding gift. Elizabeth was sickly and couldn't have children, but Tempe could and did have 6 of them with her new master, the Colonel. My great-grandmother Josephine, born a decade after slavery ended, was their youngest child. On my 38th birthday, I found their picture on the internet. It was May 7, 2007, and with those 7s, I'd like to tell you that I was feeling lucky. Tempe was in the middle of the photo. Excuse me. Her former masters, Elizabeth and the Colonel, were sitting behind her. On either side of Tempe were 2 biracial-looking girls. The one on the left was curly-haired and creamy-skinned like my dad and my daughters. It was eerie how this century-old photo of my ancestors mirrored the new family I created. Lucky and unlucky number 7. In 7 days, God made the world. In 7 plagues, God could wipe it out. On the 7th of May, I was born. In my 7th year, I was raped. It's been said that it takes 7 years for every cell in your body to change. In the 7 years after finding the family photo, I crisscrossed the country, uncovering the stories of the people in it, and a breach began to mend in me. There's a name for this kind of pilgrimage. The Akan of Western Africa call it Sankofa. Symbolized by a bird in flight with its head craned backward and an egg in its beak, Sankofa means to go back and get it, or it is not wrong to go back for that which you have forgotten.
Such a great beginning. And it really does set up like the entire book, I think, in such a beautiful way. So first, I mean, how are you doing? I feel like I just published my book last May, and I felt like the whole thing was so surreal at the beginning. Like it's like time ceases to like matter, and everything's happening. You're so excited. So how are you doing?
Yeah, I am all of those things, all over the place, and I think you just need to look at my house to see that it is a manifestation of my emotional state, a complete discombobulation.
But joyful too, because guess what? Like you published the book. I just want everybody to clap again. I've been like doing the tap dance, like here comes Dionne. It's just really remarkable. So the first question I wanted to ask you, it's about the structure. I mean, we're both writers and we're both obsessed with like the shape of things, and you know what I think is really interesting about this book, the shape of it, is that it's like a braided structure. So like one braid is your life and what happens as you're dealing with this trauma of having been raped as a child. And then there's another braid, which is like this obsession with finding your ancestors and dealing with that violence. And in a way, it's like the story of this country, right? Of like the history of the United States. And so the first thing that I wanted you to talk about is like what made you choose this structure for this book?
Thank you for asking that question. I'll try to answer. I don't know how much I chose it as it chose me. So I think initially what I really wanted to do is structure the whole book around anything that I found about my ancestors. And so I think that initial impetus remains to some degree. But then, as you said, I needed to also find a way to braid in my own story. So I think what I tried to do was use whatever I discovered as the spine of the story to kind of like propel, us from chapter to chapter. And then find a way to then tell my life now, or whatever pertinent thing, had happened in my life, based on that, like the discovery of, something about my ancestors. So I wanted those discoveries about them to be the propulsion, what's moving us forward.
Yeah, and it's really propulsive. I mean, it's so interesting because when I got it in a paperback, an advanced copy of it, so it feels lighter. And each time I came back to it, because I read it like in a white heat, I was like, oh, this is so good, And even the hard parts, I was like, oh my God, like this is so enlightening. And the way you've done it, I think is really honest, like in a really important way. But each time I came to the book, I just was like astounded that it's so light. Like I was like, this book feels like so big, like the depth of it is so big. And so I think that's really difficult to pull off. To be able to tell a story that is telling the truth, that it's like found objects and known objects, and then also that it's weaving together like your own personal life. And I loved it. I mean, you guys this is just gonna be a fangirl event. I love your book.
Fine.
So I wanted to, I really do think that being courageous as a writer is is probably the hardest thing to do, because so often we're like seduced by the idea of like presenting the world in a very sanitized way. And I thought that the way that you address the violence that has happened in this country, like what this country has been built on, is the violence against Black women. And for some reason, it seems like we just still don't acknowledge that. And so I was really curious about like how all my questions are process questions, so now teach me how to write a memoir. I just wanted to know, like, why do you think it's important to confront issues of like sexual violence as fundamental to the creation of the United States? And I also want to know, why do you think there is so much resistance in acknowledging the mass rape of Black women in this country?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think for me, why it was, did you say why was it important to me, or why is it important just like generally?
I think it's the same question.
Okay, so to me it seemed important because to me it seemed obvious, but in my experience it just seems that that for some reason that piece of it gets lost in our discussions when we have discussions about slavery and how it is foundational to our economic prowess. You know, we became a superpower in a very short amount of time, and it's because of, you know, we enslaved people. So there is that. And then if we talk about what else did we do? You know, we made laws around Black women's bodies, you know, and that their children would be slaves as well. And then so I just feel like we don't talk about that because you know, we don't talk about sex, you know, and we don't talk about violence and sex. And even if you think about like when we bring awareness to sexual violence, I'm always shocked at how often, whenever there is like any media around it, it's often about men, you know, like who were abused in childhood, or it's about adult women in the workplace, which are issues, but those are not the people who are most victimized.
Right.
So the people who are most victimized actually are indigenous women, and then it's Black women. So it's just, I think there's something to that, that is the truth, and that's what we most often don't talk about. And to me, you know, if you can't face it, you can't fix it. So I feel like it's actually very empowering to say that this is what the truth is, because then you have something that you can do about it. I mean, I think that's why I wanted to be a journalist. I found it really empowering to know things, you know, and I felt like that gave me some agency then to like figure out what I could do about it.
Yeah, I mean, I also feel like one of the things that's so striking about the memoir is that there is like a very visceral way in which we understand like the cost to the human being, to like the person, when we are, and by we I mean you, like as you are, you know, both trying to numb away that trauma from childhood, and as you are, as you're growing up and you're time and time again, you're like forced to confront it. And I was thinking, as I was reading the book and as I was rereading the book, I was thinking a lot about how, like, so much of what happens in this country, like these bursts of violence and these bursts of rage that I think happens are like that sore, right? Like that kind of rottenness that is in the marrow of like who we are as a country. And how like the more and the more that we try to like hide it and numb it and look away from it, the like bigger it becomes. And so in your own life, I thought that journey, you know, we're talking a lot about like no spoilers. and Dionne said, what can we spoil? I mean, it's like my life, which I love that you're like so open about it. And I was just thinking a lot of, like, I kept thinking about this idea that, you know, the way that you talk about your own personal life, to me, like, just really becomes symbolic of so many of the things that happen in this country. And it's really, it's so remarkable. I mean, it's so powerful. So I also wanted to talk a little bit about joy.
Yay.
And because I think that it's there's so much beauty and love in this book, and there is this idea of that I think sometimes when we pick up a book that has like difficult themes as human beings, it's like I think we have a habit to like buy the book so that it's in our bookshelf, right? Like, oh, it's like
No.
and and I think a lot about 2020 when like for the first time in the United States, like nearly every book in the New York Times bestseller book was dealing with race because we were having a reckoning. But then like a couple of months later, guess what happened? And then when I talk to people about those books, right, because some of us read those books all the time, like most people haven't read the books. And I'm very proud of those of you. I'm sure none of those people are you. Everybody here has read all the books. But that's something that to me I was thinking a lot about, Dionne, about like just just as you're confronting it, as you're working through all of this, I think that there's a way in which like your bravery and your courage to me made something really beautiful. And I can only imagine how difficult it was to write this book and to go on the journey of finding your ancestors. But I wanted you to share with us what was joyful, because I actually found the book to be filled with so much beauty.
Oh, thank you. I'm so glad, because that's what I wanted. And I don't think I could have stayed with something that wasn't, uplifting for me, Man, I just feel like my ancestors were really incredible, regular people, but they really survived so much. And I'm thinking particularly about my great-great-grandmother Tempe, lived to be like 104 years old, which is insane. This is a woman who spent half of her life enslaved and then the rest of her life free. And she owned property, which I thought was fantastic. I love that when it came time, she made a decision to make sure that her daughters would be property owners. So she gave them some of her property, which I just thought, yay! We often hear like the firstborn or the son, at that time, that would have been sort of a typical thing. So I thought, like, good looking out, Grandma, yes, like, take care of your daughters. I grew up in the AME tradition. My dad's an AME minister, he's here. But did not start off AME. My dad and my mom chose to become AME. My dad started off as a Methodist, and that was the tradition that Tempe also practiced. I guess in my mind, I often would think about Black people who had been enslaved sort of having the religion of their enslavers forced upon them. So it was actually really very powerful to learn about more of the history of Methodism in this country, and that among the first Methodists in this country were enslaved Black women. That was shocking to me. And so while I don't know exactly how Tempe, my great-great-grandmother, came to Methodism, I did find it really illuminating and kind of like a beacon that women before her, enslaved people before her, did have some agency in how they, in this most sacred space in their lives, how they prayed. I found that really, really beautiful, and kind of gave me actually a new appreciation for the religion that brought me up. There are so many things. Even I will say, even about like my great-great-grandfather, my enslaving ancestor. There are things about him that like I was proud to learn, if that's the right phrase. I guess after slavery was over, and he was really interested in cultivation, and did cultivate a strand of a pecan, if you're from the South, that you can can still buy today. And so while I don't know all of the ins and outs of that, there's something about that that just, it stayed with me. We make pecan pies every Thanksgiving, and there was something about that felt, that I took a little bit of pride in. So, twisted history to it, but something that was nice to know. The discoveries for me were every time I learned anything, honestly, about my great-great-grandmother in particular, it was just kind of like served as like a talisman for me.
Yeah, it's so powerful to learn like the extent to which you went. I won't tell you, you gotta read it. But it's really fascinating, like how you went about connecting the dots and finding information that for others it would have just been like the first dead end, would have been like never mind. Like there's no way to find our people. And I think that what I appreciate, among the things I appreciate most about this book, I think is first of all like the resilience and the strength that you are learning about through your ancestors, especially Tempe. I think it's very clear that like you inherited that, and it was beautiful for me as a reader to be like, badass, yes, check. and then I think also just like this idea that like we are called upon as artists, I think so often to like light the way for other people, and to be like, we are not people less people. And like just because we don't have the archives and we can't find the names of those from whom we are descended, it doesn't mean that we don't come from remarkable, beautiful, powerful people. And so it was just like really important, I think, that you continued, and like your obsession, which at one point I was like, where are you going? I don't think this is not safe. This is me talking to the book. And I honestly was like, yes, you are like on this journey, which is like a spiritual journey. And like this is now like the archive. This is the proof. This is like what gives the rest of us this like lovely totem, right? To be like this, even if I don't know who my great-great-grandmother is, it could have been Tempe, or someone like Tempe. So thank you for that.
Thank you. That's so beautifully put, because that's what I wanted. Sometimes people ask me, so why did you choose to write a memoir as opposed to a novel? You could have made this into a novel. It's because I needed the record.
Yeah.
And I needed to leave something, for my girls and to give to my family. And so, I couldn't have said that better.
You'd think I was a writer. So now we're gonna open it up for your questions. So I know at the beginning people get a little shy. So who's gonna be the brave? Talking about courage. Oh, please.
Hey, I was wondering, I know you, I haven't read it yet. You probably used your skills as a journalist doing the research, but did you also reach out to professional genealogists, or how did you approach it just as a research task?
So the question is around genealogy and whether or not Dionne, aside from her using her own skills as a journalist, was whether or not you also reached out to like some professional genealogists.
Yeah, I did eventually reach out to some professional genealogists in Louisiana and Mississippi, because I just didn't have the ducats to go and take the time and do what I would have needed to do. Also because they already had the relationships down there, and that is something that comes up in the book, that relationships matter. People have the key to certain archives, and it was better for me, for people who were known and who could say to so-and-so, hey, I just need, this document, than for unknown me with this face to go certain places. So I kind of sadly learned that the hard way. Had I really thought about the implications of showing up at certain archives, I probably would have just tried to save my money and do a lot of that, farm that out, hire genealogists to help me with this research when I couldn't do it myself. Thank you, Kate, for that question.
Who's next? This side? Yes, please.
Hi, thank you. Hey, Dionne. Thank you so much. I'm so thrilled to be here and be a part of your community celebrating you, and I feel very moved, so I'm so happy.
Thank you.
And hungry, but that's beside the point. Thank you.
So I think about redemption and reparation. On a personal level, do you feel redeemed, like there's been redemption, that there's been a repair, that there's been some, it certainly seems that way, you know, from this process. And also, moving forward, reparations for what's happened. I work in Perth Amboy, and I remember, if I'm not mistaken, there was some reparations in Perth Amboy, a plaque or something, and how can I, as a person who wants to see reparation, what can I do to make that happen to people that have been hurt tremendously?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think when it comes to reparations for slavery, you know, New Jersey, we are trying to get some bills through, so you can certainly contact your senators and tell them that you support those bills. And these are just bills that would study reparations. They're not even, you know, saying what they are. So any support you could do at the state level, that would be great. And I think for me, do I feel, I don't think I was looking for redemption, but for personal repair and reconcile to my family, my story, my country. I absolutely do, yeah, because I feel like I really have a much better understanding about the trajectory of our country, and have a much better understanding about my people's place in that. And I think I also know that they did have a place, and so does everybody. And so I really appreciate being able to just kind of dig in to see what that was and experience it. So yeah, I feel reconciled, absolutely. And yeah, I hope that other folks will definitely support reparations for people who were, you know, descendants of people who were enslaved. I think they're probably the only group that hasn't received some form of reparations for their unpaid labor here. Thank you, Mommy.
Yes, that's great. Have you been able to address the generational emotional trauma of your ancestors?
What do you mean by that?
I mean that the trauma of the violence that's been passed down through the generations. I mean, it's in our DNA.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, I do that by trying to connect to my ancestors. There's, you know, all that I can do for myself personally, all that I can do within my family, but, you know, every day I keep an altar, and you know, my ancestors' picture is on it, all of them, including the ones who I'm not very fond of, which, you know, I've learned from some of my you know, spiritual leaders that that's the way to do it. And so I keep my ancestors really close, and I think for me that has been really comforting and healing for me. I'm sure folks have to find, you know, their own way to move through that, but most importantly, I think being honest and forthright about the harms that have happened, you know, as you said, generationally, is for me the biggest step that I've taken towards repair. Thank you.
Hey Dionne,
Hi, Greer.
so happy to be here. It's a similar question, but a little different. It's about and I hope I'm not going to do a spoiler. You told me a story about meeting with your white cousins, the descendants, and about kind of the inequality of assets and wealth that had been accumulated generationally. And I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about your process of forgiveness and reconciliation with, you keep referencing your ancestors, and yet you have this dual reality of your ancestors are both black and white, and your black ancestors suffered so many harms and continue. The legacy is still there. So what has your process of forgiveness been?
I guess, just getting honest with what happened, getting clear about that, my feelings about that, and actually allowing myself to be angry was really important. I feel like I was socialized, and maybe many women will, relate to this, but socialized to not be angry and to move on to forgiveness. And so I think in this instance where, my people hadn't done anything wrong and something really unjust had been done to them, it was appropriate for me to feel a lot of anger. I actually went to my minister after meeting, with those family members because I was so angry and so uncomfortable with my anger. And it was actually very healing for me to hear my minister not say anything like, what can we do to help you move on? That was no words like that came from him, and that was really helpful to me to be able to honor this sort of ancestral rage, and that was really medicinal for me actually now that I think about it. And so as far as forgiveness, I think it was Mary Bethune McClone, I just messed up her name, Mary McLeod, Bethune, thank you, Bethune, who said, forgiveness is not forgetting, it's letting go of your pain. And so for me, that has been the forgiveness. I completely acknowledge and remember what happened, but I'm letting go of the pain of it. It's not mine. So that's been very helpful to me. So yeah, I hope that answered your question. Thank you.
I'm not the only person here who followed your blog, Finding Josephine, way back in the day. And I think you did a presentation, I think your dad was there too that day, about the things you had found at the beginning of your journey. And I at that point, I was thinking, oh, this is going to be a book. When's she going to do a memoir about this? But it sounds like it had more stages, like you didn't go from blog to book. So I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about how you pivoted from being this blogger to kind of a novelist, because I know that was what you were intending to do when you got your MFA. Like, how did it become a thing you are sharing with all of us at this point? If that question
Lord, that's a book within itself. The blog really was about, so one of the joys, I forgot this, was meeting my third cousin once removed, Monique, who became my research partner, who I met through Ancestry after I found that picture. It was such a joy to find somebody who was as obsessed with our family's history as I was, and who could, really get in there and appreciate and dig with me, and who had two daughters also around the same age as mine, so we really bonded. And that was wonderful, just being able to go on that journey with her. And really, the blog was because we were trying to figure out what we could do to try and find more information, more of our people. So she took a bunch of things on the list of to-dos, you know, and I took a bunch of things on the list of to-dos. And since I was a journalist, I was like, okay, I'll do the blog. Where, you know, it was that or like send every person with the last name Burton, Stewart, Ford, like a postcard. And that didn't seem like that was gonna be a very efficient way to contact people. So, you know, I started the blog, Finding Josephine, because that's who I was looking for, my great grandmother, on my father's side. And yeah, as we continue to find things, kind of just being honest with myself that I did really want to write a book about it, and just sort of, you know, writing that all along as we were researching is what I did. Also getting back to the joy and real ambition I had to write a novel and you know, applying to NYU, getting in and going, okay, I'm gonna do this, and then I'll just get back to the memoir. And then just, I guess, honesty, like raising its head again, that really this was the thing that had been lighting a fire under me for years. And so that I just was gonna pivot and really go full force toward this. So I hope that is an answer to your question. Thank you, Lisa.
Hi, Dionne.
Hi. So nice to see you.
It's good to see you. How many relatives did you meet, and how many places did you travel to?
Wow. Okay, so I met probably, oh gosh, at least 10 relatives. And I traveled to Maryland, Mississippi, Louisiana, Virginia, Brazil. And the Brazil thing is a little side story, but it was an important part of my journey only because, you know, the story, Brazil's story around slavery has parallels, and it's huge. And I lived in Brazil when I was a teenager, and it was in Brazil that I actually kind of got a real perspective on our country for the first time that I had never really had before, just because of their ideas around race and slavery. I lived in a town that had been founded by U.S. Confederates, like of all the places in Brazil to end up, I ended up at this place. And that made me realize just how little I knew about our own country's history with slavery, and yeah, it was shocking. So I ended up going back to Brazil to visit that town with my family now. So yeah, I clocked some miles and met a lot of wonderful family, and happy to still be in contact with some of them, which has been really nice. Yeah, thank you.
Do maybe one more?
Do you have any suggestions for people who are trying to follow your journey and finding people in their family? What approach would you, from your own experience, give to us? I mean, I know there's genealogy and anthropology and all that, but you personally, those things we know about, but is there anything that you would give us that we might not know? I mean, it's probably in the book, I haven't gotten the book yet, but if you could share something that would be helpful.
Boy, that you might not know, that's hard to say, but I would say that, I mean, the very first thing that, I wouldn't have a book had I not talked to my grandfather when I was 12, you know? So, I think the first thing is to talk to your elders and get their stories and, you know, be inquisitive and listen to them as much as possible. Thank God for that, like, lazy summer day that we had, just the two of us, where he could kind of like stretch out with his memories, you know, because he had my full attention. So I feel like that's the very, very, very first thing, is to get with your people and get their stories. And then after that, it's probably gonna be some go online to, repositories like Ancestry.com or like family, the family one that the Latter-day Saints that they host. What's that called? Family Search. That's it. Family Search. So and it was free the last time I looked at it. I think it's still free. So yeah, trying to just get as many documents also about your family. Their death certificates, etc. Census reports are really helpful. So, but first and foremost, oral tradition stories.
I'm sure we could go on all evening because, we have one more question.
Is that okay?
Yes. Do you need the microphone?
Thanks. Congratulations, Dionne, and thank you for a wonderful discussion. So I've known you through this process, and I've seen you grow into a pretty expert historian compared to someone like me. And I was struck in your book by the journalism and the history finding, and I was wondering how you felt about the fact that opportunities now are coming to you to use that expertise and to use that historical knowledge, and sort of has put you in this position now of being somebody who has all this institutional knowledge, and sort of how you feel about representing that post publication. And tag question, do you think you'll do more journalism? Do you think you'll go back into any kind of journalism? Because I really saw the gift you have there.
Oh wow, well, thank you.
That's 10 questions. Out of order.
Journalists will tell you it's hard, man, and people get mad when you ask them stuff, and that was the part that was most difficult for me, like how just angry. I have a low tolerance for not niceness towards me. So I don't know. That remains to be seen. I mean, I think if anything, I would love for maybe this to shine a light on is just how difficult it is to do this work, and how we should really provide more support for people, particularly when their ancestors are enslaved. You shouldn't really have to go banging on the door of descendants of people who enslaved your people asking for records. So if there's some way to make those public and more accessible, that would be a wonderful way to begin some reparation. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure about that. I'm gonna go where my gut tells me to go next. But I do hope, if I'm representing anything, is that this is really, really difficult stuff that should be more accessible to us, so that we can just honor our people and have